Before we get into this video, a quick reminder that we are just days away from the Aldas and Tomo live show in London this Friday on the 4th of August. I am absolutely buzzing to see hopefully some of you there. We have a great group of guests lined up as well, including Matt and Tommy from P1, Katie Fairman, and also Dan and Blake from the Engine Braking podcast. The last few tickets are still available, so see the link at the very top of the description for what should be a really fun night. Alpine will have a fourth different team principal in the space of 4 years when we return to Zandvoort, and it's yet another major management change for what feels like the most chaotic team on the grid. To do this justice, I have got to go almost person by person of what's happened over the last 4 years since the team was renamed to Alpine. Beginning in 2021, the team ousted team principal Cyril Abiteboul, with Marcin Budkowski replacing him and Laurent Rossi joining as Alpine CEO. Just a year later, at the beginning of 2022, Marcin Budkowski would be booted out of the team, as well as non-executive advisor and four-time world champion Alain Prost. Otmar Szafnauer, previously of Aston Martin, took over as team principal, although 2022 would be a year where there would be also lots of chaos, this time on the driver front. First, the team fumbled Oscar Piastri, who despite being an Alpine junior, ended up signing for McLaren. Then, when they didn't want to show faith in Fernando Alonso with a long-term contract, he ended up leaving the team of his own accord, with the team scrambling to look for his replacement, eventually landing on Pierre Gasly. A year later, in 2023, Laurent Rossi has been moved aside as Alpine CEO to focus on what Renault calls special projects, whatever that means. In his place, Philippe Krief is now the Alpine CEO, but stay with me folks because we're not done yet. Over the Spa weekend, it was announced that Otmar Szafnauer would be sacked as team principal, along with sporting director Alain Permain, who was part of the Enstone team for 34 years. In the interim, Bruno Firmin, who originally was part of the power unit department and then became vice president of Alpine Motorsport, will act as the team principal. That is not all, however, because in conjunction with all of that, it was also announced that Pat Fry, who was the team's chief technical officer, has also jumped ship and signed for Williams. But don't worry, Ocon and Gasly are still driving and haven't been sacked. Yet. In terms of what the structure is right now as I'm recording this, Luca De Meo is still the overall CEO of Renault Group, Philippe Krief is the CEO of Alpine, Bruno Firmin is the vice president of Alpine Motorsports, and for the moment he is also the interim team principal before a long-term option can be found, or whatever long-term means in the world of Alpine. Even the way the news was announced, dropping Szafnauer and Permain on the Friday of a race weekend, with no succession plan in place, just screams of dysfunction. Surely a better option would have been to give Otmar the rest of the season, and then make hopefully the long-term changes over the winter break. It doesn't seem like they even know who they want in charge or what the hierarchy should be at this stage. And all of these changes just scream of panic moves, especially now with the team dropping below Aston Martin and McLaren after 12 races, which no doubt has had an effect on Renault's decision making. The reason why both Szafnauer and Permain have been ousted by the team is because there is a massive disconnect between where Renault want the Alpine team to be and what Otmar thought would be achievable under the same timeline. To quote Bruno Firmin, he said, "At one stage we realized we're not really on the same line." Renault's entire purpose of having this team is to market the Alpine brand. Bruno Firmin, in that same interview where I got that previous quote, constantly kept mentioning the word project as he called it. That is very clearly something that he's been told right from the very top of the Renault food chain, and it feels like that's where the disconnect is coming from. Renault are focused on building the Alpine brand, and they expect the Alpine F1 team, which is their main marketing tool, to be equally growing and succeeding at a similar rate. The way the Alpine management has been operating has felt very corporate and very unclear. Even the whole idea behind their 100 race plan, which this year Rossi then went back on and actually said it might be more like a 120 race plan, felt so random. Now, Bruno Firmin during the Spa weekend talked about how all of these changes are part of phase 2 of the Alpine project, And the problem with all of these corporate buzzwords is that they don't actually mean anything unless there's tangible investment going on behind the scenes that actually helps the team develop to be at the level of the teams they want to beat. And now, Otmar talked in May about how the team needed investment both in terms of their tools and also recruitment, but he rightly pointed out that the timescale for these kinds of things is 2 to 3 years. It just doesn't happen overnight. You order a simulator, 2 years later, you got it. It just takes that long to make. And the same with people. You want to recruit some people that you know will help the team, then you go talk to them and they say, well, you know, I'm on a 3-year contract, I'm 1 year into it, I can come in 2 years. And that's the world of Formula 1 we live in now. The engineers that have the biggest impact on performance, they sign long-term deals. And now, I'm not the biggest Otmar Szafnauer fan in the world because whether it was him or most likely Laurent Rossi, I think the way the Piastri-Alonso fiasco went down showed a laughable amount of ineptitude. But I do think in terms of timeline, he sounds like the only person that has any vague sense of perspective and realism. With the level of investment and infrastructure that the team has now, with the personnel and the drivers that the team has now, their best bet is to maybe be podium contenders towards the last year of these regulations in 24-25, and then when the new regulations do come in 2026, I think if they can be where Mercedes are now, perhaps the second or third best team on the grid, that I think is the most optimistic Alpine prediction that I can make. The problem is, it seems like Renault are too focused on building the Alpine brand and not focused enough on putting their money where their mouth is and investing in the team. To me, the recent news of an investment group which includes Ryan Reynolds taking a 24% slice of Alpine in exchange for 200 million euros of investment was almost proof of that. Renault weren't comfortable with footing the bill themselves, and so they were more interested in giving away equity of a growing F1 franchise and in exchange having someone else fund their development, as well as perhaps in the future leverage the star power of someone like Ryan Reynolds to help further grow and get more awareness on the Alpine brand. Speaking of the Alpine brand, something else that seems totally misaligned is that even if Alpine had the strongest brand value in the world with all of the exposure that they could want, Alpine, the car brand, still only has one model to sell, the Alpine A110. There is an old saying, win on Sunday, sell on Monday, when referring to the marketing power of Formula 1. But Alpine will only expand their car lineup, according to Rossi, in 2026 or 2027 at the earliest. So what's the sense in wanting instant success right now at all cost if you don't have anything new to sell for at least the next 3 or 4 years? Aston Martin are the best counterpoint to this because even though they're in a slightly different sector of the market as they sell a more luxury good, off the back of their early season success, they perfectly timed that with the launch of their brand new Aston Martin DB12, and it was great marketing to present their new model to their customers off the back of their early season success. Alpine don't have a new model to sell, they don't have something even close in the pipeline, and so why is there so much pressure to succeed right now to help grow the brand through that if you don't even have a new product to sell to your customers in the same time span? When you look at the constant interference with hiring and firing team principals and other major personnel every 2 or so years, and the lack of financial investment that Renault have made, which has got the team to where it is now, to be honest, when you consider that level of dysfunction, the fact that since 2018 Renault/Alpine have never finished lower than 5th in the Constructors' Championship, that's kind of where this team should be with that level of investment. I think that's what really frustrates me the most because Alpine is not a failing team that has a much steeper hill to climb, like say a Williams or even an Alfa Romeo, soon to be Audi. The people on the ground are good, their drivers, although not superstars, are high quality race winning drivers, and this feels like the perfect base to now double down and really ramp up your investment for 26 and 27 with a long-term plan and long-term leadership at the helm. Alpine put firing Otmar down to conflicting timelines, but I don't understand what timeline they're on. If they expect to be where Mercedes and Ferrari are now, with the level of investment that they've put in up to this point, then I think someone is going to have to inject some realism into the corporate suits at Renault. What the end goal is for this team is difficult to say. It feels like the Renault side is more interested in the marketing opportunities that having an F1 team can bring them, but without making the necessary investment into the team. And then on top of that, putting these vague 100 race, 120 race, phase 2 plans in place, it just seems like they don't really have the patience to just put the right people in place and then just leave them for 3 or 4 years to try to develop the team without constant interference. By giving away a share of the business, it already indicates that Renault are not entirely dedicated to making the F1 team work. And with the huge valuations that are now being put on F1 teams, it feels like the longer this project doesn't work out, especially if they don't see any tangible effect on the Alpine road car brand, the closer we are getting to a sale of this team if it continues on this path. Well, there you have it. Once again, don't forget that the Aldas and Tomo live show is this week, this Friday, on the 4th of August in London. It would be great to see some of you there. Don't forget that the link to the tickets and for more information is at the very top of the description. If you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.